The sound was sharp, wet, like raw meat hitting marble. Claudette Vanderberg's palm connected with Sung Hyeon-Woo's left cheek at exactly 8:47 p.m. in the private dining room of Étoile Noire, Manhattan's most exclusive restaurant, where the tasting menu cost more than most people's rent and the waiting list stretched 6 months deep. Every fork froze, every breath caught. 14 guests sat suspended in the amber glow of the chandeliers, their champagne flutes halfway to painted lips, their conversations dying mid-syllable. Hyeon-Woo didn't move. His head had turned slightly from the impact, a mechanical thing, physics doing its work. But his body remained still. His hands stayed flat on the white linen tablecloth. His expression didn't flicker. Not surprise, not anger, not even acknowledgement. Just nothing. Claudette's chest heaved beneath her Valentino gown, red silk catching the candlelight like fresh blood. Her platinum hair was immaculate. Her blue eyes were wild. The diamond on her finger, a 7-carat cushion cut, his grandmother's ring, placed there 3 months ago in a transaction disguised as a proposal, caught the light as her hand trembled at her side. "You weren't even listening to me," she hissed. "I'm talking about our wedding, and you're looking at your phone like I'm not even here." Hyun-Woo turned his head back slowly, adjusted his wireframe glasses. The left lens had shifted slightly from the impact. He pressed it back into place with one finger. "I heard you," he said. His voice was low, flat, the voice of a man who had stopped feeling things a long time ago. "The florist in Milan, the venue in Lake Como, the guest list your mother insists on controlling. Then act like it." "I am acting." She stared at him. Something flickered behind her eyes. Not hurt, but something colder. Calculation. The realization that she had made a mistake. Not the slap. The slap was theater, designed to provoke a reaction she could manipulate. The mistake was choosing a man who didn't react at all. The room was still frozen. The maitre d' hovered near the kitchen doors, unsure whether to intervene or pretend nothing had happened. A waiter in the corner gripped a bottle of Bordeaux like a weapon. And then the door to the private dining room opened. She walked in, carrying a wine bucket. Yasmeen Okoro moved the way water moves, fluid, unhurried, inevitable. Her white button-down was pressed sharp, tucked into high-waisted black slacks that traced the curve of her hips. Her braids were pulled into a sleek bun at the nape of her neck, not a strand out of place. Her skin was dark and luminous, catching the warm light like polished wood, like something ancient and valuable. She didn't look at the frozen guests, didn't acknowledge the tension thick enough to choke on. She crossed to the table, set the wine bucket down with professional precision, and reached for the bottle of 2010 Chateau Margaux, sweating in the ice. Claudette's head snapped toward her. "You!" Yasmeen paused, her hands stilled on the bottle's neck. She didn't look up. "You saw what just happened." Claudette's voice was climbing, performative now, playing to an audience. Tell him he's being disrespectful. Tell him a woman deserves better than to be ignored by her own fiancé." The room held its breath. Yasmeen lifted her gaze. Her eyes were dark brown, almost black in the low light, and they held something that made Hyun-Woo's chest tighten. Not warmth, not coldness, but a complete and total absence of fear. She looked at Claudette the way one might look at a child throwing a tantrum in a grocery store, patient, unimpressed, utterly unmoved. Then she looked at Hyun-Woo. Their eyes met. 1 second, maybe 2. But something passed between them in that sliver of time. A recognition, a resonance, a frequency only they could hear. He felt it in his sternum, a vibration like a tuning fork struck against bone. Yasmeen turned back to Claudette. "I'm here to serve food," she said. Her voice was honey over gravel, smooth with an edge that cut. "Not to teach grown men manners. That's your job." She lifted the wine bottle, poured 2 glasses with mechanical grace, set the bottle back in the bucket, and walked away without another word. The room exhaled. Claudette's mouth opened, closed, opened again. No sound came out. For the first time in her 31 years of wealth and privilege, and getting everything she ever pointed at, she had been dismissed. Not by a rival, not by a competitor, by a waitress. Hyeon-Woo watched Yasmeen disappear through the kitchen doors. He didn't hear Claudette's next words, didn't register the apologies from the maître d', the uncomfortable coughs from nearby tables, the scrape of chairs as guests decided this was a good time to visit the restroom. His world had narrowed to a single point. The space where she had stood, the ghost of her presence, still hanging in the air like perfume. Cocoa butter? Lavender? Something underneath, something warm and human and real. The scent hit him like a fist. Suddenly, he was 7 years old, hiding in the hallway of his family's sole estate, bare feet cold on the marble floor, watching through a crack in the door as his father screamed at a woman in a maid's uniform. She was crying, trying to explain something. His father's hand raised. Hyeon-Woo blinked. The memory dissolved. He was back in the restaurant, back in the present, back in his perfectly tailored Xenia suit, with his perfectly cold fiancée glaring at him across the table. "I want her fired," Claudette said. "No." The word came out before he could stop it, harder than he intended. Claudette's eyes widened. "Excuse me?" Hyeon-Woo reached for his wineglass, took a slow sip, set it down. "She did her job. You're the one who caused a scene." He signaled for the check. "We're leaving. We haven't even had the main course. I've lost my appetite." He stood, buttoned his jacket, left $300 bills on the table, enough to cover the meal, the wine, and the emotional damage to the staff. Claudette scrambled to follow, her heels clicking against the floor like gunfire. At the door, Hyeon-Woo paused. He looked back toward the kitchen. The doors were still. She didn't reappear, but he knew with a certainty that settled into his bones like cold water that this wasn't over. The penthouse was silent. 48 floors above Manhattan, wrapped in floor-to-ceiling glass, Sung Hyeon-Woo stood in the darkness of his living room and stared at nothing. The city glittered below him. A million lights, a million lives, none of them touching his. The furniture was minimal, gray, sharp, nothing soft, nothing warm. The apartment of a man who had stopped pretending he knew how to live. His cheek still burned, not from the slap. That pain had faded within minutes, a dull throb easily, ignored. No, this was something else. A different kind of burn. The place where her eyes had touched his. "I'm not here to teach grown men manners." He replayed the words, the tone, the absolute refusal to bend. Hyeon-Woo had been surrounded by people his entire life. Employees, associates, family members, women who wanted his name or his money, or both. They all bent. They all softened. They all rearranged themselves to fit the shape of his expectations, because that was what people did around power. They adapted. They survived. She hadn't. She had looked at him like he was ordinary, like his name meant nothing, like the weight of his empire, his legacy, his billion-dollar inheritance was just noise. He crossed to his desk, opened his laptop. The screen glowed cold and blue in the darkness. His fingers moved before his mind caught up. Étoile Noire, staff directory, access granted. Being a major investor in the restaurant's parent company had its privileges. Within 30 seconds, he was looking at employee files. Within 60, he found her, Yasmeen Okoro. The photo was a standard headshot, neutral background, professional lighting. But even in the flatness of the image, something came through. The set of her jaw, the directness of her gaze, the sense that she was looking at the camera, not for it. Age, 27. Position, senior server, VIP section. Employment start, 18 months ago. Emergency contact, Yasmeen Okoro, grandmother. Address, Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn. No social media links, no LinkedIn profile, no digital footprint beyond the basics. In an age of oversharing, she was a ghost. Hyeon-Woo leaned back in his chair. He should close the laptop. Forget her face. Call Claudette in the morning and smooth things over. Not because he wanted to, but because the merger between their family's companies depended on this marriage. $3 billion in pharmaceutical distribution, his grandfather's dying wish. The future of the Sung Empire, balanced on the edge of a diamond ring he'd never wanted to give. He should do a lot of things. Instead, he stared at her photo for 15 minutes without blinking. The call came at 7:03 a.m. Claudette answered on the second ring, her voice husky with sleep and last night's wine. Hyeon-Woo, I knew you'd come to your senses. Darling, about last night. We're done. Silence. I'm sorry? The engagement is over. I'll have my lawyers contact yours regarding the merger. We can restructure as a business arrangement. But the wedding is off. More silence. Then a laugh, sharp, brittle, edged with something dangerous. You're joking. I don't joke. You're throwing away a $3 billion deal because I slapped you? Because some waitress embarrassed me? I'm ending an arrangement that should never have started. He paused. You deserve someone who wants to marry you, Claudette. I'm not that person. I never was. You'll regret this. Her voice had gone cold now, the mask slipping to reveal the steel underneath. My family doesn't forgive easily, and neither do I. I'll take that risk. He hung up. The apartment was quiet. The city hummed far below. Hyun-Woo walked to the window and pressed his palm against the glass, feeling the cold seep into his skin. He didn't love Claudette. He'd never pretended to. But walking away from her meant walking toward something else, something undefined, something dangerous, something that smelled like cocoa butter and looked at him without flinching. He pulled out his phone, dialed his assistant. Clear my schedule for the next 2 weeks and make a reservation at Étoile Noire tonight, 8 p.m. Same table. He ended the call. Below him, the city woke up, oblivious to the shift that had just occurred. A billionaire had made a decision. A woman had caught his eye. And somewhere in Brooklyn, Yasmeen Okoro was waking up to a day she thought would be ordinary. She was wrong. The reservation list landed on Yasmeen's station at 6:15 p.m. She scanned it automatically. Muscle memory, 18 months of the same routine. Table 4, anniversary couple, need the champagne ready. Table 9, food allergies, flag the kitchen. Table 12, VIP, name recognition required. Her hand stopped. Table 12, 8 p.m., Sung, H. Her breath caught. Sung. The name was a ghost, a haunting, a wound that had never healed. She was 12 years old again, standing in her grandmother's kitchen in Brooklyn, watching the old woman weep over a police report that made no sense. Accidental fall. Case closed. No further investigation required. Her mother, Yasmeen Okoro, had worked for the Sung family for 3 years, housekeeper, caretaker, the woman who made sure the children were fed. The rooms were clean. The family's secrets stayed buried. And then, one night, she fell down a flight of stairs in the east wing of the Sung estate and broke her neck. Accident, they said. Yasmeen had never believed it. Neither had her grandmother. But belief didn't matter when the family had money, lawyers, and a police commissioner who owed them favors. The case was closed before Nkem's body was cold. Yasmeen had spent 15 years digging, quietly, carefully, never enough to draw attention, but never stopping either. She had files, clippings, questions that kept her awake at night, and now a Sung was sitting in her section. She looked at the name again. Sung H. Not the father. He was dead, she knew that much. prison, heart attack, poetic justice, some might say. This was the son, Sung Hyeon-Woo, the prince of a poisoned kingdom. Maricel appeared at her elbow, eyes wide. "Girl, did you see table 12? "I saw." "That's him. The one from last night. The one whose fiancée slapped him." Maricel grabbed her arm. "Yaz, do you know what he's worth? Like, literally what he's worth?" I Googled him. 2.3 billion. Billion. With a B. Yasmeen said nothing. Her fingers were trembling, just slightly. She pressed them flat against the reservation book to make them stop. "Why is he back?" Maricel whispered. "And why is he alone?" Yasmeen didn't answer. But she knew. She could feel it in her bones, in the space where intuition lived alongside old grief. He was back for her. And she had no idea why. He came back. Not the next week. Not after a reasonable interval that might have allowed Yasmeen to convince herself she'd imagined the weight of his stare, the gravity of his presence, the way the air had thickened when their eyes met. He came back the next night. 8 p.m. table 12. Alone. Yasmeen saw his name on the reservation list and felt something cold slither down her spine. She told herself it was coincidence. Rich men were creatures of habit. They found a restaurant they liked and they colonized it, claiming the same table, the same wine, the same server, until they grew bored and moved on to the next conquest. This was nothing. She was nothing. Just a waitress who had talked back to his fiancée and gotten lucky enough not to be fired for it. She smoothed her hands over her apron, lifted her chin, and walked to table 12 with the menu tucked under her arm and her armor locked in place. He was already seated when she arrived, same position as before, back to the wall facing the door, a clear sight line to every entrance and exit. His charcoal suit was different tonight, slightly lighter, the fabric catching the candlelight like smoke. His wire-frame glasses reflected the menu he wasn't reading. "Good evening," Yasmeen said, professional, neutral, giving nothing. "Welcome back to Étoile Noire. Can I start you with something to drink?" Sung Hyeon-Woo looked up. Those eyes, dark brown, almost black, with something moving behind them. Calculation, curiosity, hunger. They swept over her face like he was memorizing it, cataloging every plane and shadow for later study. "Whiskey," he said. "Yamazaki 18. Neat." "Of course." She turned to leave. His voice stopped her. "Yasmeen." Her name in his mouth was a physical thing, heavy, deliberate, like he was tasting each syllable, deciding whether he liked the flavor. She looked back. "Yes? Thank you." 2 words, nothing more. But the way he said them, low, sincere, weighted with something she couldn't name, made her pause a half-second longer than she should have. "You're welcome," she said. And then she walked away, feeling his gaze on her back like a hand pressed between her shoulder blades. He ordered light, a single appetizer. The whiskey, which he nursed for 2 hours. He didn't make conversation with the sommelier, didn't flirt with the hostess, didn't pull out his phone or check his watch, or do any of the things wealthy men usually did to broadcast their importance. He just sat and watched. Not obviously, not in a way that would make her uncomfortable enough to complain. But Yasmeen had spent her whole life learning to feel when eyes were on her, a survival skill, growing up black and female in a world that often treated both as targets. She knew when she was being observed. He observed her the way astronomers observe stars, patient, precise, like she was something distant and luminous that he was trying to understand. At 10 o'clock, he asked for the check, left $200 on a $40 tab, nodded once in her direction, and left. The second night, she told herself it was still coincidence. The third night, she started to wonder. The fourth night, she knew. He was coming for her. Always 8 p.m., always table 12, always alone. He ordered whiskey, Sometimes an appetizer, occasionally a book appeared in his hands. Leather-bound, expensive, pages that never turned because his eyes weren't on the words. They were on her. By the fifth night, the staff had noticed. "He's back again." Maricel cornered her by the service station, eyes bright with gossip. "Yas, that's 5 nights in a row. Do you know how insane that is? Men like him don't eat at the same restaurant 5 nights in a row. They have private chefs. They have yachts. Maybe he likes the food." "Girl." Maricel grabbed her arm. "He's not looking at the food. He's looking at you." Yasmeen pulled free, pretending to reorganize the napkin. "Station. He's a customer. I'm doing my job." "Uh-huh. And I'm the Queen of England." Maricel leaned closer, lowering her voice. "Do you know who he is? Like, really know?" "He's rich. They're all rich." "He's not just rich. He's Sung Hyeon-Woo." The Sung. His family owns half of Seoul. Tech, real estate, pharmaceuticals. His grandfather built an empire from nothing after the war. His father went to prison for some corporate scandal, died there. And now he's the heir. The whole thing. $2.3 billion, Yas. And he's sitting in your section every night like you're the main course? Yasmeen's hands stilled on the napkins. Sung. She'd known. Of course she'd known. She'd seen the name on the reservation list that first night, felt the recognition slide through her like a blade. But hearing it spoken aloud, hearing the full weight of it laid out in Maricel's breathless recitation, made it real in a way she'd been avoiding. This was the son of the family that had destroyed hers. This was the heir to the fortune built on secrets and silence, and her mother's broken body at the bottom of a marble staircase. And he was watching her like she was the answer to a question he'd been asking his whole life. That night, Yasmeen went home and didn't sleep. Her apartment was small, a studio in Bed-Stuy, one room that served as bedroom, living room, and kitchen, the walls thin enough to hear her neighbor's television through the plaster. But it was hers, paid for with tips and overtime, and the kind of relentless work ethic her grandmother had instilled in her from childhood. You work twice as hard to get half as much, baby. That's the world we live in. But you don't let it break you. You hear me? You bend, but you don't break. Yasmeen sat on the edge of her bed, still in her work clothes, and stared at the closet door. Behind it, hidden in a shoebox wrapped in an old sweater, was everything she had. Newspaper clippings from 15 years ago, the police report, obtained through a Freedom of Information request that had taken her 6 months and cost her $300 in fees. Photographs of the Sung estate, pulled from architectural magazines and real estate listings. A timeline she'd built herself, color-coded and obsessive, tracking every member of the Sung family from the day her mother started working there to the day she died. And questions. So many questions. Why had her mother been in the East Wing at midnight? She was a housekeeper, not security. Her shift ended at 9. Why had the investigation been closed so quickly? 48 hours. No autopsy beyond the basics. No interviews with staff. No follow-up. Why had the Sung family's lawyers contacted her grandmother within days of the death, offering a settlement that came with an ironclad NDA? Her grandmother had refused. Blood money, she'd called it. They think they can buy our silence. They think we'll forget. Yasmeen hadn't forgotten. She crossed to the closet, pulled out the shoebox, sat on the floor with the contents spread around her like relics of a war she'd been fighting alone. Her mother's face smiled up at her from a photograph. Yasmeen Okoro, 32 years old, skin like dark honey, gap-toothed grin, braids piled high on her head. She was holding a toddler in her arms. Yasmeen, chubby-cheeked, laughing at something off camera. They'd been happy once, before the Sungs, before the stairs, before everything. Yasmeen touched the photograph gently. Then she reached for her laptop, opened it, and typed a name into the search bar. Sung Hyeon-Woo. The results flooded her screen. Business articles, society pages, Forbes profiles. A face that was becoming too familiar. Sharp jaw, intelligent eyes, the kind of beauty that looked carved rather than born. She clicked on an image search, scrolled through photographs of him at galas, board meetings, charity events. Always in a suit, always alone or with people who clearly meant nothing to him. Never smiling, never touching. And then she found an older image, a family portrait, dated 23 years ago. The Sung family arranged on the steps of their estate. Grandfather seated in the center like a king on his throne, father and uncle standing behind, and in the front, 2 children. A girl maybe 10 years old smiling brightly, and a boy, 7 or 8, serious-faced, small, Sung Hyeon-Woo. Yasmeen stared at the photograph, at the estate behind them, at the east wing, just visible in the corner of the frame, where a window on the 2nd floor marked the top of a staircase that had become a grave. Her phone buzzed. She jumped, nearly knocking the laptop off her legs. The screen glowed with an unknown number, a text message. She opened it. "You deserve better than that place. I'd like to offer you a position. Private chef. My home. Name your price. SHW. Yasmeen's heart stopped, then started again, pounding so hard she could feel it in her temples, her throat, the tips of her fingers. He had her number. He'd found her number somehow, through the restaurant's files, through his money, through whatever dark magic billionaires used to get whatever they wanted. And he was offering her a job, a way in, a door. She looked at the photograph of her mother, at the shoebox full of questions, at the laptop screen still displaying his face. This was insane. This was dangerous. This was walking into the lion's den and hoping he wouldn't smell the blood. But it was also the first real chance she'd had in 15 years. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. She should say no. She should block the number and forget his face and keep her head down and stay safe. "You bend, but you don't break." Yasmeen typed a reply. "I don't do interviews over text. If you want to talk, you show up in person. Tomorrow, 7 a.m., Café Rue Dix, Brooklyn. Don't be late." She hit send before she could change her mind. The response came in 4 seconds. "I'm never late." He was early. Yasmeen arrived at Café Rue Dix at 6:47 a.m., thinking she'd have time to order coffee and steady her nerves before he showed. But when she pushed through the door, he was already there, seated at a corner table, a cup of untouched espresso in front of him, watching the entrance like he'd been waiting his whole life for her to walk through it. He was wearing a black turtleneck, no suit jacket. The casualness of it was almost more alarming than his usual armor. It made him look human, approachable, which she knew instinctively was a lie. Men like him were never approachable. They just learned to fake it better. "You're early," she said, sliding into the seat across from him. "So are you." A waiter appeared. Yasmeen ordered a cortado. The waiter vanished. Silence settled between them like a third presence at the table. Hyeon-Woo studied her, not with hunger this time, with something closer to curiosity, like she was a puzzle he was, trying to solve without having all the pieces. "You could have ignored my message," he said. "I could have." "Why didn't you?" Yasmeen met his gaze, held it. "Maybe I'm curious too." "About what?" "About why a man worth $2 billion is spending his nights in a restaurant, watching a waitress instead of running his empire." Something flickered in his expression. Surprise, maybe. Or appreciation. "You researched me." "You researched me first." He didn't deny it, just lifted his espresso, took a small sip, set it back down. His hands were steady, long fingers, no rings, a silver Rolex on his left wrist that probably cost more than her apartment. "I want you to work for me," he said. "Private chef, live-in position, Salary negotiable, but I'm thinking 150 a year, plus housing and benefits. You'd have full access to my kitchen, my accounts, whatever you need to do your job. Why me? Because you're not afraid of me. Yasmeen's cortado arrived. She wrapped her hands around the cup, letting the heat seep into her palms. Buying time. Everyone's afraid of something, she said. True. But most people look at me and see the money, the name, the power. They see what they can gain or what they might lose. You looked at me like I was just a man. He leaned forward slightly. Do you know how rare that is? To be seen as ordinary? You're not ordinary. No. But when you looked at me, I wanted to be. The words hung in the air between them. Honest, raw, dangerous. Yasmeen thought about the shoebox in her closet, the questions without answers, the ghost of her mother that had followed her for 15 years. She thought about the East Wing, the staircase, the 48-hour investigation that had buried the truth along with Hyeon Okoro's body. And she thought about the man sitting across from her, the son of the family who had taken everything from her, the heir to an empire built on secrets, the key to a door she'd been trying to unlock since she was 12 years old. You bend, but you don't break. One condition, she said. He raised an eyebrow. Name it. I need to think about it. Give me a week. You have 3 days? 5. The corner of his mouth twitched, not quite a smile, but close. 4. Final offer. Yasmeen extended her hand across the table. Deal. His palm met hers. Warm, dry, the grip firm but not crushing. A current passed between them. Electricity, chemistry, the spark of two forces meeting that should never have touched. He held on a beat too long. She pulled away first. 4 days, he said, standing. He left a $100 bill on the table for a $6 coffee. Don't make me wait. And then he was gone, slipping through the cafe door and into the gray Brooklyn morning, leaving Yasmeen alone with her cooling cortado and the weight of a decision that could change everything. She pulled out her phone, opened the Notes app, started a new file, Operation Sung. Underneath, she typed 3 words, find the truth. 4 days. Yasmeen spent them the way a general spends the night before battle, planning, preparing, questioning every decision she was about to make. She called in sick to Étoile Noire, spent hours in the Brooklyn Public Library, digging through newspaper archives on microfiche, visited her grandmother in the nursing home in Crown Heights, sat beside her bed, and watched her sleep. Yasmeen Okoro, 81 years old, mind slowly unraveling from dementia, the only other person alive who knew the truth about Nkem's death. Mama, Yasmeen whispered, holding her grandmother's weathered hand. I found a way in. I'm going to find out what really happened. I promise. A daisy's eyes fluttered open. For a moment, clarity broke through the fog. Sharp, fierce, the grandmother Yasmeen remembered from childhood. Be careful, baby, she rasped. Snakes don't warn you before they bite. Then she was gone again, drifting back into whatever dreamscape her failing mind had constructed. Yasmeen kissed her forehead and left. On the 4th day, she texted Hyeon-Woo from her apartment. I'm in. When do I start? His response came in seconds. Now. Cars outside. Yasmeen looked out her window. A black Bentley idled at the curb, so out of place in Bed-Stuy that a group of teenagers had gathered to take photos of it. She grabbed her bag, packed light, just essentials, and walked out of her apartment without looking back. The car smelled like leather and money. A driver in a pressed suit held the door for her, his face professionally blank. Yasmeen slid onto seats softer than her mattress at home and tried not to think about how much the car probably cost. She was alone. No Hyeon-Woo, just the hum of the engine and the city sliding past tinted windows like a film she was no longer part of. The drive took 40 minutes. Brooklyn to Manhattan, surface streets, to the gleaming towers of Billionaire's Row. The Bentley pulled into an underground garage beneath a glass spire so tall its top disappeared into low-hanging clouds. The elevator required a keycard and a fingerprint scan. It rose silently, the numbers climbing past 40, 50, 60. Yasmeen's ears popped. The doors opened directly into the penthouse. She stepped out and forgot how to breathe. The space was enormous. 3,000 square feet of marble floors, floor-to-ceiling windows, and furniture that looked like it belonged in a museum. The living room alone could have swallowed her entire apartment. A grand piano sat in one corner, untouched, dusty. Abstract art hung on the walls, cold, geometric, devoid of warmth. The city sprawled below like a circuit board, lights blinking in the gathering dusk. It was the most beautiful place she had ever seen. It was also the loneliest. "You came." His voice reached her before she saw him. Hyeon-Woo emerged from a hallway to her left, still in his work clothes. Charcoal suit, no tie, top button undone. He looked tired, handsome in a way that felt almost aggressive, like his face was designed to make people uncomfortable. "You sent a car," she said. Seemed rude to refuse. "You could have." "I know." They stood there 10 feet apart, measuring each other. Predator and prey, though Yasmeen wasn't entirely sure which was which. "Let me show you the kitchen," he said. He led her through the apartment, past the living room, past a dining table that could seat 12 but clearly never had, past a home office with 3 monitors and a view of Central Park that most people would kill for. The kitchen stopped her cold. It was a chef's fantasy. Viking range with 8 burners, sub-zero refrigerator, marble countertops veined with gold, copper pots hanging from a ceiling rack like jewelry, a walk-in pantry, a wine fridge, an espresso machine that probably cost more than her car. "This has never been used," Yasmeen said. Not a question. "I don't cook." "Then why have it?" He was quiet for a moment. "My mother designed it. Before she passed. She said a home isn't a home without a kitchen that gets used." He looked at the range, something flickering behind his eyes. "I never had the heart to change it, or to use it." Yasmeen filed that away. Mother, deceased. Another piece of the puzzle. "Your room is through there." He gestured to a door off the kitchen. "Private bathroom, closet, everything you need. The contract is on the counter. Read it. Sign it if you agree. We'll start tomorrow." He turned to leave. "Hyeon-Woo." He stopped, looked back at her over his shoulder. "Why me?" she asked again. "The real reason." For a long moment, he didn't answer. Then, "Because when you looked at me, I felt like I existed?" He disappeared down the hallway before she could respond. Yasmeen stood alone in the unused kitchen, surrounded by copper and marble, and the ghost of a woman she'd never met, and wondered what the hell she'd gotten herself into. The first week passed in a rhythm she hadn't expected. She cooked. He worked. They existed in parallel, 2 orbits that occasionally intersected over plates of food she made, and he consumed in contemplative silence. The contract had been generous, $150,000 a year, plus housing, plus a discretionary budget for ingredients that made her head spin. She'd signed it at midnight on her first night, sitting on the edge of a bed softer than clouds, telling herself this was about the investigation. Just the investigation. But the truth was more complicated. Yasmeen had expected Sung Hyun-Woo to be a monster, the heir to a fortune built on her mother's silence, the son of a man who'd gone to prison for crimes she was only beginning to understand. She'd expected coldness, cruelty, the casual brutality of the ultra-wealthy. Instead, she found emptiness. He woke at 5 every morning, worked out in a private gym she'd glimpsed once, all steel and sweat and controlled violence, showered, dressed in suits that cost more than her yearly salary. left for the office by 7, and returned after 9, sometimes 10, always with the same exhausted eyes and rigid shoulders. He didn't have friends. No one called except his assistant. No women appeared at the door, no family members, no one who might suggest he had a life outside the glass tower he'd built around himself. He was alone, completely, devastatingly alone, and for reasons Yasmeen refused to examine too closely, that made her chest ache. On the 5th night, she decided to cook something real, not the French-influenced dishes she'd been trained to make at culinary school, not the fusion experiments that had gotten her noticed at Étoile Noire. Something hers. She started with her grandmother's jollof rice, the Ghanaian version, rich with tomatoes and Scotch bonnets, and the smoked paprika Adayas had always insisted made the difference. Then she added a Korean twist, gochujang braised short ribs, slow-cooked for 6 hours until they fell apart at the touch of a fork, collard greens with sesame oil, plantains fried crispy and sweet. 2 worlds on one plate. Hers and his. Hyeon-Woo came home at 9:30, later than usual. She heard the elevator chime, the soft footsteps on marble, the pause as he registered the smell filling the apartment. He appeared in the kitchen doorway, stopped. What is that? Yasmeen didn't look up from plating. Dinner. It smells like... He didn't finish the sentence. She glanced up and saw something she hadn't seen before. Confusion, vulnerability. The mask slipping just for a second before he pulled it back into place. Sit down, she said. He sat. She placed the plate in front of him. Rice mounted in the center, short ribs glistening with sauce, greens and plantains arranged around the edges like offerings. He stared at it for a long moment. Then he picked up his fork, cut into the short rib, and took a bite. His eyes closed. The silence stretched. 5 seconds. 10. Yasmeen watched him, suddenly nervous in a way she hadn't expected. She wanted him to like it, needed him to, for reasons that had nothing to do with her investigation and everything to do with something far more dangerous. This tastes like something I forgot, he said finally. His voice was rough, like a memory I didn't know I had. My grandmother's recipe, the rice at least. The short ribs are my own. He opened his eyes, met hers. Your grandmother is Nigerian? Ghanaian. My mother was born in Accra, came here when she was 16. Tell him, a voice whispered in her head. Tell him who your mother was. Tell him why you're really here. She opened her mouth. His phone rang. The sound shattered the moment like glass. Hyeon-Woo looked at the screen, and something in his face went cold. Hard. The warmth she'd glimpsed vanished, replaced by the mask she'd first seen at Étoile Noire. Grandfather, the screen read. He answered in Korean. Yasmeen didn't speak the language, but she recognized the tone. Clipped, formal, the voice of a man who was used to obeying orders from someone who still terrified him. The conversation lasted 3 minutes. Hyeon-Woo said little, mostly listening, his jaw tightening with every passing second. When he hung up, he set the phone face down on the table and stared at it like it might bite him. I have to go to Seoul, he said. Yasmeen's heart stuttered. Seoul, the Sung estate, the East Wing with its marble staircase and buried secrets. When? Tomorrow night. He looked up at her. Come with me. It wasn't a question, but it wasn't quite a command either. Something in between. A request wrapped in expectation. The words of a man who wasn't used to asking, but was trying to learn. Why? Because my grandfather wants to meet the woman I've hired to live in my home. A pause. Because I don't want to go alone. The vulnerability in that admission hit her like a blow to the chest. This man, worth billions, feared by thousands, alone in his glass tower, was asking her to stand beside him when he faced his family. This is your chance. The practical part of her brain screamed, access to the estate, access to the archives, access to everything. This is a mistake. The other part whispered, you're starting to care about him. That will destroy everything. Okay, she said. I'll come. Something shifted in his expression. Relief, maybe. Gratitude. He didn't say thank you. Men like him rarely did. But he nodded once, and that nod held more weight than words. We leave at 8, he said. Pack light. We'll be there 3 days. He stood, looked at his plate. Half finished, the food cooling. This was... He paused, searching for words. I haven't eaten anything that tasted like home in 15 years. Thank you. He left the kitchen. Yasmeen heard his bedroom door close. She sat alone at the marble counter, surrounded by the remains of a meal that had somehow become more intimate than she'd intended, and tried to convince herself she was still in control. She packed at midnight. 1 suitcase. Professional clothes, mostly. She didn't own much else. A black dress in case there were formal events. Sensible shoes. Her laptop, encrypted with every file she'd gathered over the years. She was almost finished when her phone buzzed. Not a text, an email. Unknown sender. No name. The subject line made her blood run cold. You're playing with fire. She opened it. No message. Just an attachment. A photograph. Yasmeen clicked it open, and the world tilted beneath her feet. It was her mother, Hyeon-Okoro, 20 years younger, standing on the steps of the Sung estate in a simple blue dress. She was smiling. Not her usual bright grin, but something softer, more private. And she wasn't alone. She was holding the hand of a little boy. A boy with dark hair and serious eyes, and a face Yasmeen knew, as well as her own reflection. Now, Hyeon-Woo, 5 or 6 years old, looking up at Nkem with something that might have been adoration, holding her hand like she was the only safe thing in his world. Yasmeen stared at the photograph, read it again and again, searching for meaning. Her mother hadn't just been a housekeeper. She'd been close to the children, close to him, and someone wanted Yasmeen to know. She looked toward the door, toward the hallway that led to his bedroom, where a man she was starting to feel things for slept unaware of the storm gathering around them both. What happened to you, Mama? What did you know? And why did they need you dead? The private jet smelled like old money and new leather. Yasmeen sat in a cream-colored seat, wider than her bed at home, watching Seoul materialize through the oval window, a sprawl of neon and concrete, ancient palaces nestled between glass towers, the Han River cutting through it all like a silver scar. 14 hours in the air, 14 hours of silence, broken only by the whisper of recycled air and the occasional clink of ice in Hyeon-Woo's untouched whiskey. She hadn't slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the photograph, her mother's face, the little boy holding her hand, the soft smile Nkem had worn, the kind Yasmeen remembered from childhood, the smile that meant safety, warmth, love. What had her mother been to that boy? What had that boy grown into? You've been quiet. Hyeon-Woo's voice cut through her thoughts. She looked up. He was watching her from across the aisle, still in yesterday's clothes. Black turtleneck, dark slacks, the stubble on his jaw, suggesting he hadn't slept either. Just nervous, she lied. He studied her for a long moment. Then he unbuckled his seatbelt and crossed the aisle, lowering himself into the seat beside her. Close. Too close. She could smell his cologne, sandalwood and something darker, something that made her think of smoke and midnight. Don't be, he said. His voice was low, meant only for her. You're with me. The words should have been comforting. Instead, they landed in her chest like a stone dropped into still water, sending ripples through everything she thought she knew. You're with me? But who was he, really? The lonely man in the glass tower? The heir to an empire built on secrets? Or something else entirely? Something connected to her mother in ways she was only beginning to understand. Tell me about your grandfather, she said, deflecting. What should I expect? Something flickered in Hyeon-Woo's expression. Not quite fear. Men like him didn't admit to fear, but something adjacent. Wariness. Old wounds. Sung Dae-young built our family from nothing, he said. After the war, he had two things: a brilliant mind and an absolute refusal to lose. He built the first factory himself, brick by brick, negotiated deals with men who wanted to kill him, survived 3 assassination attempts before he turned 40. He sounds terrifying. He is. Hyeon-Woo paused. But he's also dying. Cancer. The doctors give him 6 months, maybe less. He's settling accounts, deciding who inherits what, making sure the empire survives him. And you're the heir. I'm an heir. There are others. His jaw tightened. My uncle, my cousins, people who would do anything to take what my grandfather has promised me. Yasmeen filed that information away. Uncle, cousins, competitors, potential enemies, potential suspects. Why did he want to meet me? She asked. Hyeon-Woo was quiet for a moment. Then, because I've never brought anyone home before. The admission hung between them, heavy with implication. Yasmeen looked at him, really looked, and saw something she hadn't expected. Vulnerability, loneliness, the exhaustion of a man who had spent his whole life performing for an audience that would never love him. He doesn't know, she realized, about my mother, about any of it. Or did he? The plane began its descent. Below, Seoul glittered like a promise she wasn't sure she could keep. The Sung estate was a fortress disguised as a home. The car that collected them from the private airstrip wound through the hills of Gangnam for 20 minutes before passing through iron gates older than the country itself. The grounds sprawled across manicured acres, traditional hanok buildings with curved tile roofs, connected by covered walkways and surrounded by gardens that looked like they'd been designed by painters rather than landscapers. Beautiful, cold, a prison made of silk and stone. The main house rose 3 stories, a fusion of ancient and modern that should have felt jarring, but instead felt calculated. Every detail designed to impress, intimidate, and remind visitors exactly who they were dealing with. Staff materialized to take their bags. Hyeon-Woo's hand found the small of Yasmeen's back, a possessive gesture, protective, marking territory, as he guided her up the stone steps toward the entrance. She should have pulled away. She didn't. The doors opened before they reached them, and there he was, Sung Dae-young, 87 years old, seated in a wheelchair that probably cost more than a car, wrapped in a traditional hanbok of midnight blue silk. His face was a map of wrinkles, each one earned in blood and fire. His eyes were the color of black ice, clear, sharp, seeing everything. Those eyes found Yasmeen immediately. They swept over her face, her hair. She'd worn her braids down, cascading over her shoulders, her skin, her posture, every detail cataloged and filed in a mind that had been calculating angles for 8 decades. Hyeon-Woo. His voice was a rasp, weakened by illness, but still commanding. You didn't tell me she was beautiful. You didn't ask. A ghost of a smile crossed the old man's lips. Then his gaze returned to Yasmeen, and the smile vanished. You look familiar, he said, in perfect English, not a trace of an accent. Have we met? Yasmeen's heart hammered against her ribs. He knows. He remembers. I don't believe so, she said. Her voice was steady. A miracle. I've never been to Seoul before. Dae-jung studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded, the tension easing slightly. Perhaps you simply have one of those faces. He gestured toward the interior. Come, dinner is waiting. We have much to discuss. He turned his wheelchair and rolled into the house. Hyeon-Woo's hand pressed more firmly against Yasmeen's back. Breathe, he murmured. You're doing fine. She wasn't, but she followed anyway. Dinner was a battlefield dressed as a banquet. The dining room stretched 50 feet. A long table of dark wood, set with porcelain and crystal that probably predated the Korean War. Yasmeen was seated at Daejung's right hand, a position of honor that felt more like an interrogation chair. The food was exquisite, course after course of traditional Korean dishes, each one presented like art. Yasmeen barely tasted any of it. Daejung asked questions about her family, her education, her career, how she had come to work for his grandson. Yasmeen answered carefully, revealing nothing that mattered. Her grandmother was elderly, in a nursing home. Her mother had passed when she was young. She'd put herself through culinary school, worked her way up, earned her place. All true, all incomplete. Your mother, Daejung said, pausing over a cup of tea. How did she die? The question hit Yasmeen like a slap. An accident, she said. Her voice didn't waver. When I was 12. I'm sorry to hear that. Losing a parent. Young, it shapes a person. His eyes glittered. Makes them hungry, determined, dangerous. He smiled. She didn't. I'm not dangerous, she said. Everyone is dangerous, child. The question is only what triggers them. He set down his tea. Hyeon-Woo tells me you're an excellent chef. Tomorrow night, you'll prepare a meal for the family. A test, if you will. To see if you're worthy of the position my grandson has given you. Grandfather, Hyeon-Woo started. It's fine. Yasmeen met Daejung's gaze, held it. I don't mind being tested. I know my worth. Something shifted in the old man's expression. Respect, maybe, or recognition. Good, he said. Then we understand each other. That night, Hyeon-Woo was summoned. A servant appeared at his door at 11 p.m. with a message from Daejung. Urgent business matters, the future of the company, decisions that couldn't wait. He looked at Yasmeen with something like apology in his eyes. I'll be back as soon as I can. Go, I'll be fine. He hesitated, reached out and touched her face, just a brush of his fingers along her cheekbone, there and gone. Then he left, and she was alone. Yasmeen waited 30 minutes, made sure the hallway was empty. Then she slipped out of her room and began to explore. The estate was a labyrinth, corridors that twisted and doubled back, rooms that opened into other rooms, staircases that led to nowhere. She moved silently, years of navigating creaky floorboards in Brooklyn apartments paying off in ways she'd never expected. She was looking for the archives, the records, anything that might contain information about her mother's time here. On the second floor of the West Wing, she found a locked door, heavy wood, iron hinges, a keyhole that looked old but maintained. Yasmeen reached into her hair and extracted a bobby pin, another skill her grandmother had taught her. Because you never know when a door might need opening, baby, and no man is going to open it for you. The lock was trickier than expected. It took her 4 minutes, her heart pounding the entire time, ears straining for footsteps that never came. Click. The door swung open. Inside was a study. Dark, dusty, the smell of old paper and secrets. Yasmeen slipped inside, closed the door behind her, and pulled out her phone to use as a flashlight. Filing cabinets lined the walls, dozens of them, floor to ceiling, each one labeled with dates and categories. Financial records, personnel files, legal documents, correspondence. She moved quickly, scanning labels until she found what she was looking for. Staff records, 1995 to 2010. Her mother had started working here in 2002, died in 2005. Yasmeen pulled open the drawer, flipped through folders until she found it. Okoro, Unchem, household staff. Hired, March 2002. She opened the file with trembling hands. Inside were standard documents, employment application, background check, performance reviews. Her mother's handwriting on the original application form, neat and careful, listing her qualifications and references. But there were also notes, handwritten, in the margins of the performance reviews. Security risk. Too close to the children. Recommended for reassignment. And then, on a single sheet of paper, dated the day before her mother died. Termination approved. Immediate. By order of S.T.M. S.T.M. Yasmeen's mind raced. Sung Tae-min, Hyeon-Woo's uncle, the other heir. She pulled out her phone and photographed every page, hands shaking so badly she had to take each shot twice. They killed her. They approved her termination, and then they killed her. Footsteps. Yasmeen's blood froze. Heavy footsteps, approaching down the corridor, getting closer. She shoved the file back into the cabinet, closed the drawer as quietly as she could, and looked frantically for a place to hide. A heavy desk dominated one corner. She dove beneath it, pulling herself into the shadows, making herself as small as possible. The door opened. Light flooded the room. Not a flashlight, but the overhead fixtures, harsh and sudden. Yasmeen pressed a hand over her mouth to stifle her breathing. Through the gap between the desk and the floor, she saw shoes, expensive Italian leather, polished to a mirror shine, and above them, the hem of trousers that cost more than she made in a month. A man crossed to the filing cabinets. She couldn't see his face, but she watched his hands, manicured, precise, flip through folders until he found what he was looking for. He pulled a file. She caught a glimpse of the label before he opened it. Okoro incident, sealed. There's more. There's an entire file about what happened to my mother. The man examined the contents for a moment. Then he pulled out his phone and made a call. It's me. His voice was cold, cultured, the voice of a man who had never been told no. The girl is here, in Seoul. He brought her here. Silence as the person on the other end spoke. I don't care what you think is possible. I'm telling you what's happening. She looks exactly like her mother, and she's asking questions. I can see it in her eyes. More silence. Then handle it. Tonight. Before she finds anything else. He hung up, tucked the file under his arm, turned off the lights. The door closed. Yasmeen didn't move for 5 full minutes. When she finally crawled out from under the desk, her entire body was shaking. Handle it. Tonight. They were coming for her. She ran. Not away, she had nowhere to go. Didn't know the estate, didn't speak the language, couldn't get past the gates without help. But she needed air, needed space, needed to think. She found a door that led to the gardens and slipped through it into the night. The air was cold, sharp, the kind of cold that cleared the mind and reminded you that you were alive. Yasmeen walked without direction, past stone lanterns and carefully pruned trees, past a koi pond that reflected the moon like shattered glass. Handle it. Tonight. She should tell Hyeon-Woo, should tell him everything, who she was, why she was here, what she'd just discovered. But what if he already knew? What if this was all a trap? What if he'd brought her here specifically so his family could deal with her away from American soil, away from anyone who might notice she'd gone missing? You're with me. His voice echoed in her mind, the way he'd touched her face before leaving, the loneliness in his eyes when he'd admitted he'd never brought anyone home before. He doesn't know, she told herself. He can't know. But could she trust that? Could she trust him? Yasmeen. She spun around. Hyeon-Woo stood at the edge of the garden, silhouetted against the lights of the main house. His meeting must have ended. He was looking at her with something like concern, his brow furrowed. What are you doing out here? It's freezing. She opened her mouth, closed it, tried to find words that wouldn't reveal everything and destroy the fragile thing building between them. "I need to tell you something," she said, her voice cracked. "About why I really came here. About my mother." The gunshot shattered the night. Close, too close, somewhere inside the main house. Alarms screamed to life, a wailing siren that split the darkness like a blade. Lights flooded the compound. Guards shouted in Korean, running toward the main building with weapons drawn. Hyeon-Woo moved without thinking. He grabbed Yasmeen's arm and pulled her behind a stone wall, shielding her with his body. "Stay down," he ordered. His voice had changed, no longer the tired businessman, but something harder, colder. A man who had been trained for moments like this. More gunfire, shattering glass, a scream cut short. "Someone's inside," Yasmeen whispered. Hyeon-Woo's jaw tightened. His hand found hers in the darkness and gripped it hard enough to bruise. "Yes," he said, "and they're coming for us." The estate had become a war zone. Gunfire crackled through the night, not the disciplined bursts of trained security, but something wilder, chaotic. The sound of men who had come to kill, not capture. Hyeon-Woo moved like smoke through the darkness, one hand locked around Yasmeen's wrist, the other pressed flat against the stone wall as he guided them away from the main house. His breathing was controlled, measured. The breathing of a man who had prepared for moments like this, even if he'd hoped they would never come. "Where are we going?" Yasmeen whispered. "Safe room, beneath the east wing." His voice was barely audible over the alarms. "Reinforced steel, biometric locks. Even if they get through the guards, they won't get through that door." The east wing, where her mother had died. Yasmeen's stomach lurched, but she kept moving. Survival first, ghosts later. They skirted the edge of the compound, using the gardens as cover. Twice, Hyeon-Woo pulled her behind statues as guards ran past, shouting into radios in rapid Korean. Once, a bullet struck stone 3 feet from her head, and she bit her tongue so hard she tasted blood. Finally, they reached a servant's entrance, a low door hidden beneath a wooden trellis heavy with wisteria. Hyeon-Woo pressed his palm against a concealed panel. A light flashed green. The door clicked open. Inside was darkness. They descended a narrow staircase, the sounds of chaos fading above them like a nightmare receding at dawn. At the bottom, another door, this one steel, industrial, the kind of door that belonged in a bank vault rather than a family home. Hyeon-Woo typed a code, pressed his thumb to a scanner, leaned in for a retinal scan. The door hissed open. The safe room beyond was larger than Yasmeen expected, a bunker disguised as a living space, with leather couches, a wall of monitors showing security feeds, and enough supplies to survive for weeks. But she barely registered any of it, because the moment the door sealed shut behind them, the silence became absolute, and she knew it was time. "You're shaking." Hyeon-Woo stood 3 feet away, watching her with an expression she couldn't read. Concern, maybe? Or suspicion? Or something in between? Yasmeen looked down at her hands. He was right. They were trembling, not from cold, not from fear, but from the weight of everything she'd been carrying for 15 years, finally demanding to be set down. "Yasmeen." He stepped closer, close enough to touch, though he didn't. "What were you about to tell me? Before the gunfire, you said something about your mother?" She closed her eyes. This was the moment. The edge of the cliff. She could still lie, could still protect herself, maintain the cover, find another way to get the truth. Or she could jump and hope he caught her. She jumped. "My mother's name was Okoro," she said. Her voice was steady now, the trembling in her hands transferring to the words instead. "She worked here, for your family, from 2002 to 2005. Hyeon-Woo went still. "She was a housekeeper," Yasmeen continued. She took care of the estate, the children, you. She opened her eyes and met his gaze. Do you remember her? Silence stretched between them. 1 second, 5, 10. Then slowly, something shifted in his expression. A crack in the mask, a memory surfacing from deep water. I was 7, he said. His voice was hoarse. There was a woman. Kind. She would bring me food when my father was angry. Read to me when my mother was too sick to leave her room. He paused. I remember warmth, safety, and then she was gone. She didn't leave. Yasmeen's throat tightened. She died. Here. In this house. On the staircase of the East Wing. They said she fell. I remember the funeral. Hyeon-Woo's brow furrowed. My father wouldn't let me attend. He said it wasn't appropriate. That staff deaths weren't family matters. She didn't fall, Hyeon-Woo. The words came out harder than she intended. She was pushed. Someone in your family killed her and covered it up. And I came here, came to you, to find out who. The silence that followed was absolute. Yasmeen watched his face cycle through emotions, confusion, disbelief, understanding, and finally something that looked like grief. Not for himself, for her. You used me, he said. Not an accusation, an observation. Yes. The dinner, the job, the way you looked at me like I was ordinary. He laughed, a hollow, broken sound. It was all just access. At first, Yasmeen stepped toward him, stopped, started again. At first, yes, you were just a door, a means to an end. But then, she faltered, I didn't expect you to be real. I didn't expect you to be lonely. I didn't expect to feel. Don't. His voice was sharp, final. Don't tell me what you feel. Not now. Not when I don't know what's real. The words landed like blows. She absorbed them, deserved them. But she couldn't stop now. There's a file, she said. In the study upstairs. Okoro incident, sealed. Someone took it tonight, right before the attack. Someone who knew I was getting close. Hyeon-Woo's eyes narrowed. Who? I didn't see his face, but I heard him make a call. He said I look like my mother. Said I was asking questions. Said to handle it. She swallowed. Hyeon-Woo, I think the attack tonight isn't random. I think it's a cover. They're not here to hurt your family. They're here to bury me. For a long moment, he didn't move. Then he crossed to the wall of monitors and began typing commands into a console. His fingers moved with furious precision, pulling up feeds, accessing systems, diving into the estate's digital backbone. This bunker isn't just a safe room, he said, his voice cold and controlled. It's the nerve center. Every security camera in the compound feeds through here. Every archive. Every secret my family has ever tried to bury. He turned to look at her. If there's proof of what happened to your mother, it's here. And I'm going to find it. It took 11 minutes. 11 minutes of Hyeon-Woo tearing through encrypted files, bypassing security protocols his grandfather had installed decades ago, accessing archives that hadn't been touched since before Yasmeen was born. And then he found it. Here. His voice was strange, distant. East Wing security footage, March 17, 2005, 11:47 p.m. The date her mother died. Yasmeen moved to stand beside him. Her heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears, feel it in her fingertips, taste it in the back of her throat. He pressed play. The footage was grainy, old technology, poorly maintained, but clear enough. A hallway she didn't recognize, a staircase, her mother alive, carrying a cardboard box toward the exit. And then a man stepped into frame. He was tall, lean. His face was younger but unmistakable. The same cold features, the same calculated posture, the same expensive shoes. Sung Tae-min. They argued. The audio was distorted, but Yasmeen could make out fragments. You can't leave. Know too much. I won't be silenced. The children deserve better. My brother will never believe you. Her mother tried to push past him. To leave. Taemin grabbed her arm. She pulled away, and he pushed. One motion. Casual. Almost elegant. Yasmeen Okoro fell backward. Her body hit the stairs and tumbled. Once, twice, 3 times, until she crumpled at the bottom like a marionette with its strings cut. Taemin watched for a long moment. Then he pulled out his phone, made a call, and walked away. The footage ended. Yasmeen couldn't breathe. 15 years. 15 years of questions, of searching, of being told she was paranoid, obsessed, chasing ghosts. And here it was. The truth. In stark, horrific black and white. Her mother had been murdered, and she finally knew who. Beside her, Hyeon-Woo was silent. She looked at him and saw something she hadn't expected. Not shock, not denial, but a terrible, settling grief. My uncle, he said. His voice was barely audible. He killed her. And my father. He trailed off. The pieces were connecting, the patterns becoming clear. My father went to prison, not for his own crimes, for Taemin's. He took the fall to protect the family. Why? Because that's what Sungs do. The words were bitter as poison. We sacrifice everything for the name, even our own souls. Before Yasmeen could respond, the safe room door hissed. They both spun around. Sung Taemin stood in the doorway, flanked by 2 men in black tactical gear. In his hand was a pistol, sleek and silver, pointed directly at Yasmeen's chest. I see you found the family home movies, he said. His voice was pleasant, conversational, the voice of a man discussing the weather. Unfortunate. I had hoped to handle this more quietly. Uncle. Hyeon-Woo stepped in front of Yasmeen, shielding her with his body. What are you doing? What I've always done. Taemin smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. Protecting this family from threats. That woman's mother was a threat. She saw things she shouldn't have seen, asked questions she shouldn't have asked. Just like her daughter. You killed her. I removed a problem. Taemin's smile faded. Your father understood. He agreed to take the fall because he knew the alternative was worse. If the truth had come out, the family would have been destroyed. The empire would have crumbled. Everything our grandfather built would have been for nothing. You framed my father. Hyeon-Woo's voice was ice. You let him die in prison for your crime. He was weak. Taemin shrugged. He always was. Too soft, too sentimental. He loved those children more than the name, more than the legacy. His eyes slid to Yasmeen. And now you've brought her into our house. The daughter of the woman he couldn't stop loving. Yasmeen felt the words land like a physical blow. The woman he couldn't stop loving. Her mother. And Hyeon-Woo's father. My father and Yasmeen. Hyeon-Woo started. We're having an affair. Taemin's voice dripped with contempt. For 2 years, he was going to leave your mother for her. Leave the family, abandon everything. I couldn't allow that. The room was spinning. Yasmeen gripped the console behind her for support. Her mother and Hyeon-Woo's father, together, in love. That's why Yasmeen had been so close to the children. Why she'd held young Hyeon-Woo's hand in the photograph. Why she'd smiled at him with such warmth. She hadn't just been his nanny. She'd almost been his stepmother. You killed her to keep him in line, Yasmeen said. Her voice was stronger than she felt. You murdered an innocent woman to maintain control. I protected my family. Taemin raised the gun slightly. And now I'll protect it again. Hyeon-Woo moved. He was fast, faster than Yasmeen would have believed possible. One moment, he was standing in front of her. The next, he was across the room, his body colliding with Taemin's before the older man could pull the trigger. They crashed to the ground in a tangle of limbs and violence. The guards raised their weapons, but they couldn't shoot, not without risking hitting Taemin. Yasmeen saw her chance. She lunged for the console. Her fingers found the emergency broadcast button, the one that would transmit everything in the safe room directly to the family's legal team, their media contacts, every emergency service in Seoul. She pressed it. Alarms screamed, lights flashed, and on every screen in the compound, the footage of Okoro's murder began to play. Taemin screamed in rage. Hyeon-Woo's fist connected with his jaw, and he went silent. Within minutes, the room was flooded with security forces. Real ones, loyal to Dae-jung rather than Taemin. The guards who had accompanied Taemin were subdued. Taemin himself was dragged away in handcuffs, still screaming about legacy and sacrifice and the things he'd done for the family. And then it was quiet. Yasmeen stood alone in the center of the safe room, surrounded by the wreckage of 15 years of lies, and tried to remember how to breathe. 3 months later, the trial had been a sensation. International headlines. The fall of a dynasty. Sung Taemin convicted of murder, conspiracy, and fraud. Sentenced to life in prison. Dae-jung had died 2 weeks after the trial ended. Peacefully, according to the doctors? Yasmeen suspected it was relief. The weight of secrets finally lifted. And Hyeon-Woo? Hyeon-Woo had rebuilt. Not the empire. He'd let most of that go, selling off divisions, donating billions to causes his grandfather would have despised. He kept the parts that mattered, the parts that helped people rather than hurt them. And he'd helped Yasmeen. And Kem's table opened on a rainy Tuesday in Brooklyn. It was small, cozy, the kind of restaurant where every dish told a story, and every guest felt like family. Ghanaian Korean fusion. Her mother's recipes merged with the techniques she'd learned in a kitchen her mother had never seen. The walls were covered with photographs. Kem at 25, laughing on a beach in Accra. Kem at 30, holding a baby Yasmeen in her arms. And one new addition. Kem at 32, standing on the steps of the Sung estate, holding the hand of a little boy who didn't know he would one day avenge her death. The bell above the door chimed. Yasmeen looked up from the bar where she was polishing glasses. Hyeon-Woo stood in the doorway. He looked different now, softer somehow, less armor, more human. He wore a simple sweater instead of a suit, and for the first time since she'd known him, he looked like a man who might actually know how to live. He crossed to the bar, sat down. "You're early," she said. "We don't open for another hour." "I know." His eyes met hers, held. "I wanted to see you before the crowd." She set down the glass, leaned against the bar. They looked at each other across the worn wood, two people who had survived something impossible and come out the other side changed. "Hyeon-Woo," she said softly, "about everything that happened, the lies, the investigation. I know why you did it. That doesn't make it okay." "No." He reached across the bar, took her hand. His palm was warm, real, solid. "But it makes it understandable. You were a daughter looking for the truth. I was a son who never knew there was truth to find. We were both trying to save something." He paused. "And somewhere along the way, we found something else." Her throat tightened. "And what was that?" He stood, came around the bar, stood in front of her, close enough to touch, close enough to feel the heat of his body through the thin fabric of her sweater. "Each other," he said. And then he kissed her. It wasn't a fairy tale, wasn't fireworks and happy endings. It was real, complicated, messy, built on pain and betrayal and the slow, agonizing process of learning to trust again. But it was a start. When they finally pulled apart, Yasmeen was smiling. For the first time in 15 years, the weight on her chest had lifted. "Stay for dinner," she said. "Are you asking or commanding?" She laughed, a real laugh, bright and warm and alive. "I don't ask," she said. "I command." He smiled. For the first time since she'd met him, it was real. Then I'll stay forever. If this story hit you in the chest, do me a favor. Subscribe, like, comment. Tell me where you're watching from